So this is just one location you've said before, right?
Yeah, so City Farm is this location where we are now. However, like City Farm is operated by me. I'm the farm manager here, but I'm a farmer with Patchwork Farms, Chicago. So Patchwork, Patchwork Farms is a farm location itself. We're located on California and Chicago Avenue, and that's like our main location that we have our farm stand every Wednesday and Saturdays. We have our large like walk-in cooler where we store a lot of our food, and then members of our CSA, our community supported agriculture, they come each week and like pick up their produce subscriptions that they get. And so Patchwork is the collective. We manage 4 sites total, Patchwork being one, City Farm being the largest. And then we're currently working on like a permaculture project at the Plant Chicago, which is like a horticultural incubator space. It's like an agricultural incubator location, and we're doing a permaculture project there. And then we have one farm called Frankie Farms on Franklin in California.
Okay, so there are a lot of different spaces, and this one is the main one?
No, so this is the largest site. This is
largest,
2.5 acres, yeah. But our like our flagship site is Patchwork Farms on Chicago and California. That was like our first farm that is kind of, like I said, where a lot of like our infrastructure is, because we have like our wash pack station over there, but it's pretty low tech other than like the water hookup that we need to process.
Yeah, you said there's no electricity, right?
Yeah, and so that's kind of worked into why City Farm exists, why Chicago Resource Center has been able to operate this. Is like the city has kind of like allotted the space to be dedicated to farming, but the level of investment that they've put in is actually like quite low, and so there's basic infrastructure steps that like would require a water hookup, that would require like electric hookup on site here, and so that's like been something that's kind of prohibited some of our operations to an extent, because we can't have a big walk-in fridge here. But luckily, right, like that sort of scarcity in my mind, in the mind of my farm partners, kind of spurs a lot of like the sustainability initiatives that we're able to like act upon here, right?
So yeah, how does it work with the city where, is it basically like, yeah, we have this vacant land, go ahead, use it however you want to grow food, and so they don't want, to them, something happens with the land that's not getting developed yet, and they don't have to invest electricity
Yeah, and I mean, just like with the aesthetic value of spaces too is something that the city concerns itself with, because like it is advantageous for the city to not have vacant land, and Chicago has tons of vacant lots, right? And so like even the informality of City Farm is something that I strive to like make an example of what a vacant space with limited resources can be, right? So like this is not a model that's replicated across the city, because like otherwise we could have thousands of like small urban farms, and that's kind of a model that we're looking to live here at City Farm. And so that's what like kind of the longer term hope is that like while it's been understood that like this farm will not remain here for the longer term, right? Because it just comes down to like city development. The city recently received a lot of funds to like continue the reconstruction of Cabrini Green, Old Town, and so that's going to happen.
So this space in particular that we are at right now, it's Cabrini Green. It's right by Old Town, but you can see around us there's a lot of development, right?
Yeah, and so all these like condo buildings are mixed income housing, and that was kind of how the city kind of like justifies the redevelopment of this space. It's like probably a video for another time to talk about like the history of
Cabrini Green,
right? And like the injustices essentially that were like created through these housing projects for Black and brown people in Chicago. And so in that redevelopment, right, like the city has been forced to kind of address some of these historic ills through local activism, former residents who live here. And so in that, like a lot of the condos that come up here are our mixed income. And there's, you know, there's ups and downsides to that sort of development. But what, you know, like the value that we see ourselves bringing is that while this space is unoccupied, that we can essentially, you know, form a center or a resource center for community members here, which, you know, like we actually like can't sell. Another stipulation with our agreement with the city is like we can't sell food on site here. So we don't sell any food. What we do, however, is you know, if anybody walks by and comes in, which people regularly do, we have some new people who like visit each week, and we are happy to give food away. People can make donations if they choose to, but that's the thing. You know, a lot of times we produce more food than we can even consume, given our farm stand, given our CSA. And so part of what we do as well is work with mutual aid organizations to help distribute our produce as well. We give a lot of it away. And that's kind of like how the farm is structured as well. Like we have this half of the farm and then this little section here next to the hoop house that's dedicated to our production, and that's about half of the farm. And then the other half of the farm is like our community garden area, and so we allow people who volunteer here, community members, to just like have space to grow, and you know, and that's produce that like they're not required to pay for space. They're not required obviously to pay for the produce that they grow.
So how often do volunteers come and help out with food production? I
mean, some people come regularly, some people come a little bit more infrequently, but like our volunteering is pretty just like casual in that like we don't have any like hourly requirement, like weekly requirements for people. So we do have like people who usually come like every Saturday. That's like our typical volunteer day is like Saturday from 11 a.m. until 4. And so during that time we have at least like, you know, 3 to 10 of our regular volunteers, regular residents who have space that they're growing in or just come and regularly help out here. And then, you know, anywhere from like 1 to 5 new volunteers that come and just like can kind of like assist with varying degrees of work depending on the time of the season. So it varies, and especially like given the season, like during the heat of July and August, that kind of like falls off. Volunteers fall off because it gets so hot that like people don't really want to be out here.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah. So now, like in fall, we're starting to see more people who come out on the weekends. It's like really mild and nice during the day.
Chicagoans love the fall.
Yeah, they do.
It's like
when like a lot less work needs to be done here. Like there's always work. But, like, midsummer would be like ideal for volunteers to be here. So, yeah.
So how did you get involved in doing this? Like that's something I'm very curious about, is like in your life, what kind of propelled and motivated you to now be where you are?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily something that I had like identified as like a destination. Yeah,
like when you're a kid, I'm sure you never imagined that I'm going to be a farmer in Chicago.
Like,
you know, like
anyway, no, it's like not sound attractive. I mean, so when I was younger, I did like some gardening at home with my dad garden, my parents garden, and so I'd like, you know, help like weed and stuff like that, but was never like particularly into it. And then I guess long story short, but like when I was in DePaul University for undergrad, I participated like very infrequently in like their garden club, and after graduating undergrad, went into education and was a high school teacher for a few years, and really was like depressed while I was teaching because I've never lived in poverty myself, and seeing the tremendous amount of poverty that a lot of my students faced on a daily basis was just like obviously very upsetting, and I had trouble kind of like justifying what I was doing in the classroom as like actually being something that was benefiting them. And I think a lot of that was kind of me romanticizing what teaching was and thinking that I would have these profound effects on like the students that,
what was it, like Goodwill Hunting or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, right? And so so that kind of forced me then to like start thinking about my career critically and like what I wanted to do. And so what actually kind of then shifted me into horticulture and agriculture was an interest in like the emerging cannabis industry in Chicago at the time, and that was like 2016 or so, and so legislation was just like passing then, and they there's a lot of lip service paid to like having brown and black people within the cannabis industry, especially because of everything with the war on drugs and the way in which these populations have been targeted, and so thinking that I could step into cannabis and try to like assert myself, I started to like acquaint myself with agriculture, with urban agriculture specifically, and saw that there are all these like really interesting things happening within horticulture, and like that's where my focus kind of shifted from cannabis specifically to just agriculture, and specifically urban agriculture, and realizing that like you don't need to just like grow wheat. At least I felt I didn't need to just like grow wheat just for a living, right? There's a lot of other things that could like take up the bulk of your time within agriculture, and so from there I was kind of looking into like different ways in which I could step into urban agriculture, and as I was transitioning out of teaching, I was actually like recruited to work for this industrial supply company that was completely unrelated to horticulture, but I accepted the job because I had been familiar with the company prior to working there. Family members of mine had as well, and I knew that it was a good company to work for, and that they offered a number of different benefits. And so while I was there, I worked there for about 3.5 years, and during my time there, for 2 of those years, I was working towards my master's in crop sciences, and which includes horticulture, agronomy, and was getting that at the University of Illinois, and then once I completed my degree, decided to quit my job, which was last March, and then kind of came on full-time here. And so all during while I was teaching, while I was working at this industrial supply company, while I was in school, I was coming here and volunteering. And so I had been volunteering here for about 5 years by the time I finished my master's program, and had done everything from just like starting out weeding and like kind of being like an amateur volunteering to working part-time with Patchwork farms, and would help them with their harvests and do various things, and kind of like set up in like the years leading up to like me joining them full-time and me helping with their operation.